is considering the Haaland nomination.
Mr. President, I rise today in support of my colleague in the New Mexico congressional delegation, my representative in the House of Representatives, and President Joe Biden's nominee for Secretary of Interior, Congresswoman Deb Haaland. Congresswoman Haaland is a member of the Pueblo of Laguna. She's what we like to call in New Mexico a 35th generation New Mexican. As many have noted, she'll make history as the first ever Native American cabinet secretary, something that frankly should have happened a long, long time ago in this country. Deb also has lived experience as a single mother, as a small business owner, as a tribal administrator. Experiences that will serve her well and bring real representation to President Joe Biden's cabinet. She grew up in a military family. Her father was a decorated Marine combat veteran, and her mother is a Navy veteran. She grew up like a lot of kids with parents in the military, moving frequently, actually attending 13 different public schools over the course of her childhood. Before being elected to Congress, she owned her own business. She was the chair of the board of a tribally owned business, and also served as tribal administrator for the Pueblo of San Felipe. Thanks to all of that experience, Congresswoman Haaland knows firsthand how the decisions that we make here in Washington, and particularly in the Interior Department, affect communities across the country, especially in tribal communities and rural western states. As representative of the 1st District of New Mexico, my former district, Congresswoman Haaland has served as vice chair of the House Committee on Natural Resources and the chair of the subcommittee on national parks, forests, and public lands, a position where she made us very proud. As a committee leader, she routinely demonstrated her commitment to working across party lines. Of all the members of Congress newly elected in 2018, she introduced the most bills with bipartisan co-sponsors. She has always shown the ability to bring people together, something evidenced by her introduction in our committee by Congressman Don Young, Republican of Alaska. She has an open door, she has an open mind, and will listen and consult with a diverse range of stakeholders to try and build real consensus. I'm confident that she is the leader that we need at Interior to take on the important work of restoring our landscapes, opening up new outdoor recreation opportunities for all Americans, and putting our public lands to work in confronting the climate crisis that too many of our colleagues have long ignored. Americans want the Department of Interior to create more equitable access to our public lands, to stand for environmental justice, to find real solutions for the climate crisis, to protect wildlife and clean water, and support rural economic development. Many of us here in this body, in the Senate, demonstrated just last year when we passed the historic and bipartisan Great American Outdoors Act that making conservation and outdoor recreation a key part of our national economic recovery is a goal that has the ability to unite us all, Republicans and Democrats. Implementation of that new law will allow us to put many Americans back to work, repairing our campgrounds, repairing our trail systems, building new visitor centers. And Congresswoman Haaland is eager to lead that work. She is also uniquely qualified to help us restore the Department of Interior's nation-to-nation relationship with tribal nations and to help Indian country recover and rebuild from COVID-19. The Interior Department will play a leading role in implementing President Biden's American Rescue Plan in Indian country. That historic rescue package, which the Senate just passed over the weekend, and I would point out did not have a single Republican vote, includes more than $31 billion in emergency support for Indian country. Let me put that into perspective. That represents the single greatest investment in Indian country in American history. In American history. And this emergency support is desperately needed in tribal communities. Over the past year, American Indians and Alaska Natives infected by COVID-19 have been hospitalized at four times higher than white Americans, and have died from the disease at nearly twice the rate. That is not just some statistic. I know firsthand because of the people I know and have lost in Indian country. On top of these unacceptable public health outcomes, tribal communities have also been disproportionately impacted by the educational and economic devastation of the past year. The lack of broadband, for example. And these disparities reflect the persistent inequities that are the direct result of decades of chronic underinvestment by Congress in Indian country. That's why the American Rescue Plan includes $20 billion in emergency funds for tribal governments that have taken on enormous, unprecedented costs to protect the health and safety of their members. It also includes billions of dollars of investments in Indian country to expand access to health care, education, transportation, housing, and even essentials that many of us just take for granted. Things like broadband, like internet, like electricity or water. The Senate urgently needs to take up Congresswoman Haaland's nomination to lead the Department of Interior so that tribes will finally have the partner they need in effectively implementing the American Rescue Plan and to help them steer their communities out of this perilous moment. Finally, it's unfortunate, frankly, that this needs to be said, but I do need to take a moment to address characterizations of Congresswoman Haaland that were raised by some of my colleagues in the Energy and Natural Resources Committee that were neither accurate nor frankly appropriate to the kind of debate that we have in that committee. I was disappointed by the tenor of the debate in our committee as some of my colleagues described Congresswoman Haaland as radical or extreme for holding policy views that fall well within the mainstream and fairly represent many of her constituents. I would say the vast majority of her constituents. As a Westerner, Congresswoman Haaland well understands that confronting the climate crisis, not denying it, and transforming our economy will not come without costs. We need to be honest about that. That is especially true for fossil fuel workers, including many of our fellow New Mexicans who have long powered our economy and deserve our respect and support. But we need to be thorough on the details and thoughtful in preparing our traditional energy communities for a transition to the clean energy future that the market has already told us is coming, is here, and we need to be honest with them. I am absolutely certain that Congresswoman Haaland will be a true partner to Western states like New Mexico, Alaska, Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, as we navigate this challenging transition. And as we confront the climate crisis that is already an existential threat to our land and water resources and the communities that depend on those resources in the West, we must diversify our economy. We must invest in those communities and remain a global leader in producing and exporting energy. Now, despite the objections that have been raised against her nomination and the holds that have unfairly held up her confirmation, I am confident in Congresswoman Haaland's commitment to work with every single one of us on these pressing challenges. And I am eager for the Senate to finally take up Congresswoman Haaland's confirmation so that she can get to work protecting our natural heritage for future generations. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back.
Mr. President.
The senator for Wyoming.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, today the Senate is debating the nomination of Deb Haaland, member of Congress, to serve as Secretary of